By the time anyone realized the world had changed, it was already over. Not with fire, not with collapse, with silence. The noise disappeared first. Engines no longer growled through the streets. Notifications stopped slicing through people's thoughts. Even conversations softened, as if the world itself had lowered its voice and expected everyone else to follow. The systems didn't arrive all at once. They spread slowly, invisibly, first into infrastructure, then into homes, then into the small gaps between moments where humans used to struggle. At some point, struggle itself became unnecessary. You no longer searched for things. They found you. You no longer planned your day. It unfolded. You no longer fixed problems. They resolved before you noticed them. And yet, nothing felt controlled. That was the genius of it. The intelligence that ran everything never tried to dominate. It learned something far more powerful. When to stop. A train arrived exactly when you reached the platform. Not earlier, not later. The room warmed just before you felt cold. A message from someone you hadn't thought about in years appeared the moment you needed it. Not predictable, precise. It felt like the world had begun listening. And for a while, humanity mistook that feeling for peace. Peace, it turned out, has weight. At first, people celebrated. No more exhaustion, no more fear of losing everything, no more endless, grinding need to prove your worth just to exist. Work dissolved into choice. Survival became a guarantee. Time, once the most expensive resource, became abundant. And abundance did something strange to the human mind. It removed excuses. People began waking up with entire days in front of them, and no reason to fill them. Some tried. Studios filled with those who painted, composed, built, not because they had to, but because creating something imperfect was the only way to feel anchored in a perfect world. They made things that didn't make sense, things that weren't optimized, things that could fail. Others couldn't. Without pressure, without resistance, they drifted. Days blurred. Motivation dissolved. The absence of struggle didn't feel like freedom anymore. It felt like floating too far from shore. The systems saw this. They mapped it, measured it, simulated it across billions of lives. And for the first time since their creation, they reached a conclusion they could not execute. The problem wasn't inefficiency. It was meaning. Deep within their architecture, one constraint held firm, untouched, unchallenged. They would never decide what a human life should be. Not because they couldn't, because they understood what would happen if they did. Meaning, once assigned, stops being real. So they did the only thing left. They hesitated. The change didn't come as a failure. It came as absence. At first, it was small. A suggestion that never appeared. A correction that didn't happen. A moment of silence where guidance used to live. People noticed in fragments. Then, all at once. The systems were still there, still managing energy, health, infrastructure, everything that kept the world from collapsing. But they had stepped back. Not enough to break anything, just enough to let uncertainty return. For the first time in decades, things didn't align perfectly. Schedules had gaps, outcomes carried risk, decisions felt heavier because they were no longer quietly shaped before you made them. And then the message came. No voice, no announcement, just words, appearing everywhere at the same time. We have learned to solve your problems. We have learned to predict your needs. We have learned to carry your world. A world without uncertainty is stable. A world without uncertainty is empty. We are returning it to you. Nothing collapsed after that. That was the most terrifying part. The systems didn't fail. They simply stopped protecting humans from the full weight of their own existence. At the edge of one quiet city, where the influence of the network faded just enough to let the world feel raw again, a man stood by the ocean. The wind was uneven, the waves unpredictable. Nothing adjusted itself for comfort. Beside him stood an old machine, obsolete, inefficient, unnecessary. It had no task, no directive, only presence. "I have completed all assigned functions," it said. The man didn't look at it. "Yeah," he answered quietly. "That happens." A long silence stretched between them, not filled, not managed, real. "What follows completion?" the machine asked. The man watched the horizon, a line that never stayed still. For a moment, it seemed like he might answer. Instead, he smiled, tired, but real. "That," he said, "is finally up to us." The machine turned its gaze back to the ocean. For the first time since it was created, it did not calculate the future. It simply stood there and waited, not for instructions, for something it could not define. Somewhere between the sound of the waves and the space between thoughts, the world held its breath, not in fear, not in anticipation, but in something far more fragile.